The season begins this week, and the fate of the 2025 New York Jets will come down to three pairings: Fashanu Membou, Fields Engstrand, and Gardner Williams. Locked On Jets begins now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Labor Day and welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, September 1st, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making this show your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Our episode today is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, my fellow Jets fans, we've done it. We have made it through the offseason. The Jets kick off their 2025 regular season Sunday afternoon against the Pittsburgh Steelers. On today's show, we're going to talk about what it will take for the 2025 New York Jets to be successful. I think there are three duos on this team who will play an outsized role in determining whether this season will be a success or a failure. We have one duo on the defensive side of the ball, the classic quarterback offensive coordinator duo, and a pair of young tackles on the offensive line. And that's who we are going to begin with. Now, I think if you are objectively looking at this New York Jets offense, at the skill positions, you have a few things to work with. I'm not saying that there are no pieces to work with on wide receiver, on running back, and on tight end for the New York Jets. You have Garrett Wilson, 3 seasons, 3,000-yard years. You have a promising rookie at the tight end position in Mason Taylor. You have a stable of running backs who are young and talented in Breece Hall and Braylon Allen, and we might even throw Isaiah Davis in there. But I think it's pretty clear that the Jets have a lot of question marks beyond these players. Now, in past Jets seasons, in the Adam Gase era and the Todd Bowles era, the Jets did not even have a good starting point at the skill positions. I mean, you had pretty much nothing to work with. On this Jets team, you have pieces to work with. But the group is not complete, particularly when we're talking about the pass catchers. And that's an issue because Justin Fields himself is very much a work in progress. When the Jets signed Justin Fields this offseason, I don't think anybody expected it with the idea that Justin Fields is going to be the quarterback for the next decade. I think the view is that Justin Fields is a reclamation project. And if he succeeds this season, he buys you some time. He could be a bridge quarterback who can get you to the quarterback you eventually draft in the first round, whether it's next year, whether it's the next year after or the year after. And that puts a lot of stress on the Jets offensive line. Now, the good news is this is an offensive line that has talent and has potential. I think you're pretty solid in the middle of this offensive line. You never know, maybe somebody regresses, maybe you suffer injuries, but on paper, especially based on the way these guys worked last season, I think you have to like John Simpson at left guard, Joe Tippmann at center, Elijah Vera Tucker at right guard. And by the way, they have a pretty good backup of Josh Myers, who will be the first guy off the bench if there's an injury to any of these three guys. Probably one of the top backup offensive linemen in the league, a guy with 3 years of starting experience, a guy who's not going to be a disaster. And that's really what you want out of a backup offensive lineman. It's tough to ask for much more than a guy with experience and a guy who will give you credible football. The big question mark comes at the tackle position because the Jets have two guys who are inexperienced, two guys whose level of play is a wild card in Olu Fashanu and Armand Membou, but two guys with big ceilings. You can go down a roster and you might say, well, this undrafted free agent has a great ceiling, but you don't really know that. When you draft back-to-back tackles in the top 11 in back-to-back years, those are two guys that have a very, very high ceiling. The question is how effectively they'll play this year. Now, I will say this. I think Olu Fashanu finished the 2024 season very strongly. It was a bit rough in the early going. We know he was kind of bouncing around the line. He was playing right tackle. He was playing guard. He's a natural left tackle, so maybe that threw him off a little bit. But I also think, he just wasn't physically there yet. And I think about halfway through the season, maybe it was strength and conditioning work in the weight room. He just looked better after he took over for Tyron Smith. And I'm sure part of it's, he was playing his natural position at left tackle after Smith went down. But Olu Fashanu looked credible. I would be surprised if Fashanu did not give you at least credible play at the left tackle position. But the question is, are you going to get credible play or are you going to get star level play at left tackle? And then at right tackle, Armand Membou, look, preseason was a struggle for him. We saw some good. We saw some upside. That Green Bay game where he did not allow a pressure in 10 snaps. That was a positive. The next two games did not go that well. That's to be expected. Even guys who turn into really good tackles frequently struggle in the early part of their rookie seasons. So with Membou, look, there are going to be some really rough moments early in the season. I don't think there's any question about that. The question is, how quickly can he improve? Can he have a Fashanu type trajectory where he struggles early in the season and then slowly starts to put the pieces together? And then by the end of the year, you have a strong right tackle. This is important. The Jets have to lean on their offensive line this year. They don't have the talent at the skill positions. They have a quarterback in Justin Fields who's a giant question mark. The offensive line is the one spot where the potential exists realistically for the Jets to be really good. Now, Fields is a guy who has struggled to deal with pressure in his career. And Fashanu at left tackle is going to be critical there. He's the guy that protects the blind side. And when the Jets drafted Fashanu in 2024, I don't think the idea was ever that he was going to be the road grader at left tackle, that he was going to clear out space in the run game. I think the idea was for him to become a great pass protector, a guy you did not have to worry about on that side of the field, a guy who could let you sleep easy at night knowing that your quarterback's blind side was protected. In Membou, you have the guy who needs to be the road grader. He's the physical guy. He's the strong guy. He's the guy the Jets got to add physicality to this offensive line and to open up holes for Breece Hall and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis and Justin Fields, who is a talented runner in his own right. This offensive line, if everything goes right, it could be a top 10 offensive line. I'm not saying it will be a top 10 offensive line. So please, don't come back at me if the Jets have a rough week one. I'm not saying definitively this will be a good offensive line. What I'm saying is that this offensive line could be a top 10 offensive line in the way the Jets receiver group cannot be a top 10 wide receiver group. This offensive line has a lot of ability to control the line of scrimmage. And one thing we've seen from Jets teams in the recent past is when you cannot control the line of scrimmage, you have no chance on offense. The reverse of that is true. When you can control the line of scrimmage, you have a chance to be a productive offense. Even if you're not going to be a record-setting offense, even if you're not going to be a top 5 offense, a top 10 offense, you can at least be a functional offensive football team. And for the New York Jets, you're looking at a franchise that has not frequently been a functional offensive football team in recent years. It would be a big step up. So the question for this Jets offense, the number one question is Justin Fields. We're going to get to him in a bit because I think his relationship with Tanner Engstrand is going to go a long way towards making or breaking this team in 2025. At the receiver position, you've got Garrett Wilson. Out of the backfield, you got some talented backs. At tight end, you hope Mason Taylor has a very, very quick learning curve because you really need him to step up and produce starting on day one. But so much is going to be based on this offensive line. Teams that can rely on their offensive line have functional offenses. That's what we need for the New York Jets this year. For the New York Jets to have a successful season, we don't need to be the 2007 Patriots. We don't need to be the 1998 Vikings. We don't need to be the Kansas City Chiefs of the Mahomes era. We need a functional offense. And that functional offense comes through a quality offensive line. That quality offensive line comes through the pair of young tackles the Jets invested so much in delivering early in their careers. But it's not just about the offensive line. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about the most important position on the field, the quarterback position, and the relationship Justin Fields develops with Tanner Engstrand. Can these two work together? Can Engstrand find the things that Fields does well and build the offense around them? These are questions, again, that will determine the fate of the 2025 Jets. We'll dive deeper into them as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by GameTime. NFL season is back, and there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. Let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use GameTime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. GameTime is fast, easy, and backed by the GameTime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I've used GameTime myself on a number of occasions. I've gotten last-minute tickets at prices I could not believe. I also like that they give you the view from your seat. It's a picture of what it will look like from your seat, so no surprises when you arrive, no obstructed views that you weren't expecting. If you want to go see the Jets Steelers on Sunday at MetLife Stadium or any other event in the New York area or elsewhere, GameTime's the place to go. Download the GameTime app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, one word with no space for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download GameTime today. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. Looking ahead to this Sunday, Week 1 action at MetLife Stadium, Pittsburgh Steelers currently a 2.5-point favorite over the Jets on FanDuel, and this game has an over-under of 37.5 points. So odds makers thinking that it's going to be a low-scoring game and Aaron Rodgers' return to MetLife Stadium. If you want to get in on the action, FanDuel's the place to do it. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today, we're talking about three duos who hold the fate of the 2025 Jets season in their hands. In our first segment, we talked about the two young offensive tackles, Olu Fashanu and Armand Membou. But there's another duo, one player, one coach, whose work will be critical this year. And it's quarterback Justin Fields and offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrand. It's on Engstrand to develop the sorts of game plans that can maximize Fields' abilities. Now, I think if you look at Justin Fields' career to date, what you will see is a quarterback who can function if everything around him is working well. I think you'll also see a quarterback who really, really struggles if even one thing is off. And it behooves Angstrand now to put Fields into situations where he's comfortable. It behooves Engstrand to put Fields into situations where everything will work as intended. Now, how does Engstrand do that? Well, one of the interesting things when you have a new offensive coordinator is you look at what his old team did. And even if he was not the play caller, you usually look to his previous stop. So Engstrand was in Detroit last year. And I've seen a lot of Jets fans try and analyze what the offense is going to look like by looking at the tendencies the Detroit Lions had in 2024. And I understand why they do it. And sometimes this does give us a good roadmap to explain the direction the offense is going to take. I don't think what the Lions did a year ago, though, stylistically, is going to mesh with what the Jets do. And the reason I say that is Justin Fields is a very, very different type of quarterback from Jared Goff. I don't think you would get Justin Fields if you were going to run the Jared Goff offense. And you have to remember, Justin Fields was the number one target the Jets had in free agency this year. I would say Justin Fields was not just the number one quarterback they targeted. He was the player the Jets wanted more than anybody in free agency. So this is not a situation where, the Jets tried to get other guys and they had to settle for Justin Fields. The Jets had in mind that we want to run the Detroit offense. We'll try and get this guy who's like Goff, that guy who's like Goff. All right, we have to settle for Fields. I guess we'll see what we have to do. That's not what happened. The Jets prioritized Justin Fields. I don't think you prioritize Justin Fields unless you have a very specific vision of what you want to do. And I think as telling as anything for Engstrand this year, how Fields plays is going to tell us how good of a scout he is. I think sometimes we undersell how important it is that coaches are quality scouts, because ultimately the front office gets players that the coaches want. When I look back at Mike LaFleur's failures with the Jets, during his tumultuous 2-year tenure where he had Zach Wilson and Zach Wilson failed, a lot of people got on him because, he quote unquote didn't build an offense that Zach Wilson could run. I don't know how you get on LaFleur for that. They tried everything. I mean, Zach Wilson's rookie year, they pretty much gave him the full playbook. Year 2, they tried to build in a handful of staple plays that Zach Wilson felt comfortable with. Neither worked. They cut him loose early in his rookie season. threw 7 interceptions in his first 3 games. So they tried to rein him in a bit. That didn't work. They tried to run heavy game plan. They couldn't really get him to function. There was just nothing that worked. Where I blame Mike LaFleur was to the extent that he was responsible for the Jets picking Zach Wilson, because I don't think the Jets would have picked Zach Wilson second overall in 2021 unless the offensive coordinator had signed off. So a big part of this is just going to be about Justin Fields' quality. Can Justin Fields improve enough that Tanner Engstrand looks like he knows how to scout quarterbacks? Because the offensive coordinator's input is going to be really important for the Jets going forward, not just this year with Justin Fields, but I think it's pretty clear that at some point in the next couple of years, the Jets are very likely to draft a quarterback high. And the question will come down to whether or not we can trust Engstrand's input. And I think Justin Fields' quality this year is going to go a long way towards telling us whether we can or whether we can't. But it's also on Engstrand to build an offense that plays to Justin Fields' strengths. Because, again, Justin Fields is a quarterback who can function when he's feeling comfortable with everything around him. If even one thing is off, though, it could be a struggle for Fields. So how do we utilize this Fields' skill set? Well, the most obvious one would be utilizing Fields as a runner. Jets are going to have to build a heavy diet of designed runs into their playbook this year. Since Fields entered the league, he is 4th in rushing yards among quarterbacks. And you have to remember, his rookie season, he was not the starter the full year. Last year, he was the starter for 6 games in Pittsburgh. So he has not been a starter for 4 full seasons, even though he's been in the NFL 4 years. Yet, despite that, he still is 4th in the NFL in rushing yards from the quarterback position, which means that you want to take advantage of that ability. And I think that Fields is going to make Braylon Allen and Breece Hall and Isaiah Davis more efficient, because the threat's always going to be there, whether it's designed or not, that Fields could fake handing off to one of the backs and keep it himself. And when that threat's on the table, defenders have to stay at home. The defender can't crash down on Breece Hall if he's unblocked, if he knows that Fields has the ability to pull the ball out and run the ball around end for a big gain. So Fields, I think, is the type of guy who adds to the running game from his running ability, but also just the threat of the run. So that's number 1. Number 2, you're going to want to see a heavy diet of run-pass options. That was not a staple of the Detroit Lions playbook under Jared Goff. Goff is really a more of a traditional pocket-type passer who kind of goes through his progressions. Fields is not a strong guy at going through progressions. What he can run at a very high level are run-pass options, and those are plays where essentially you key on one defender, or maybe sometimes 2 defenders, and you essentially do whatever the opposite of what he wants you to do is. So if he drops into coverage, you run the ball. If he plays the run, you throw the ball past him where he's supposed to be in zone coverage. Fields is very, very good at running these types of plays. He will be very efficient at these types of plays. It was not a staple of the Detroit offense. It should be a staple of the Jets offense, because these are, first of all, simple plays, but these are also plays where Fields can be dangerous, because Fields can also tuck the ball and run himself, unlike Goff. And that might be part of the reason Detroit did not run these RPOs all that much, because you can run them without a mobile quarterback when the option is just hand the ball off. But when the quarterback can tuck it and run himself, it adds an extra element. It's the type of thing that can make these plays even more dangerous with a quarterback like Justin Fields. The Jets are also, I think, going to really need to lean into the screen game this year. So Detroit ran screens about an average rate last year. They were very efficient at running screens. And there's been some data that suggests that maybe screens are not the most efficient pass teams can make, because they typically don't produce big plays. But the Lions had a really good set of screen plays. Jets are going to need to run those plays to great effect, because they don't have a lot of great traditional pass catchers. What they do have are 3 backs who can catch the ball out of the backfield, and 3 backs who can make plays out of the backfield with the ball in their hands. So I think the Jets are definitely going to want to focus on leaning into screens more than your typical team. Another thing Angstrand needs to do is figure out ways to free up Garrett Wilson, because as we've discussed, Garrett Wilson, very talented receiver. The Jets don't have a ton of talent behind him. So that means that the Jets need to really focus on making sure he gets free, because teams are going to do everything in their power to make life more difficult on Garrett Wilson. They'll throw some double teams at him. They're going to try and obstruct him. They'll roll their coverage in Wilson's direction. They'll try and throw obstacles in his path. They'll have a guy jam him at the line of scrimmage. So Engstrand needs to try and get Garrett away from these things as much as possible. Now, Garrett Wilson's so good, he's going to get his numbers no matter what. Other teams could try and obstruct Garrett. He's still probably going to have 1,000 yards if he's healthy again. But you can also help free him up by putting him in the slot, where it's more difficult to obstruct a receiver's routes, because he starts off a couple yards behind the line of scrimmage, so you can't really jam him as easily. And he can work the middle of the field. He can run option routes. You also use motion. When you use motion, it becomes more difficult to defend. Sometimes defenses have to switch their assignments. So you can get Garrett Wilson away from a number one corner that way because it's tough to run all the way across the field with a wide receiver. So these are things Engstrand can do. And we know that Fields is going to look to Wilson, first of all, because he's the number one receiver. Second of all, because these two had chemistry. Fields was Wilson's college quarterback. And these are the types of things that can help the Jets offense move. And finally, the Jets just don't really have a lot of other options because where else is the ball going to go? Engstrand needs to make this simple for Fields. Fields needs to execute. And if this happens, this can be a successful Jets season. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball, which on paper is the stronger of the two units on the team. I think most people would expect the Jets defense to play at a higher level than the offense, but that comes down to two-star players having bounce-back seasons. Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, 2024 was a bit of a down year for both. Jets need 2023, 2022 versions of these players if this year is going to be a success. We'll dive into that more as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner, and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. If you have not joined a league yet, now's the time, and it's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm playing fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran creating your millionth league. Yahoo Fantasy is loaded with fun ways to compete and brand new features that make the game even better. With season kickoff September 4th, now's the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many fun ways to compete. Want more ways to play? Try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until one team is left standing. Want to play instantly with friends? Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Get your crew together and go to a head-to-head in a private league. No crew, no problem. Join a public league, the easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off September 4th, so don't wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people cannot name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. You can link all your accounts to Monarch and immediately spot a few subscriptions you're not even using. Canceling those alone will save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKDOWNNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKDOWNNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL at Monarch Money. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. On this Monday, we're getting ready for the 2025 NFL season. Jets fans, you've made it. It has been a long off season. The Jets take the field on Sunday for a game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, the first regular season game since the Jets concluded 2024 back in January. And it's a different Jets team that's taking the field this year than the one that took the field week one last year. And expectations are different this year. This is no longer a team that is in Super Bowl or bust mode the way it was in 2024 or 2023 with Aaron Rodgers. I think that in many spots, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, the Jets don't have the same depth that they had in the past. And your stars are always important. But when you lack depth, you lean even more on your stars than you do when you have depth. And I think that for the Jets, Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams have been the two most important players on the team on the defensive side of the ball for the last 3 years. But they are even more important this year. Both of them are coming off kind of down seasons. I think most of the Jets roster outside of Jamie and Sherwood and a couple other guys are coming off down seasons. Last year was just a total disaster for the team. Jets are counting on both these guys to bounce back in a big way, particularly Sauce, because the Jets just paid him big money this offseason. But why don't we discuss why these players are so important for the Jets this year and why they're more important than they've been in the past? Well, let's look at the defensive line. On the defensive line, Quinnen Williams has to put up big pass rush numbers because if he doesn't, where else are the pass rush numbers going to come from? Okay, Will McDonald, he's a good pass rusher, double-digit sacks a year ago. Jermaine Johnson, Well, he's going to be on a pitch count early in the season, you would presume. And Jermaine's still coming off the Achilles injury. So you hope Jermaine gets off to a fast start, but realistically, there's a chance he gets off to a slow start. And after that, I mean, there's not a lot on this defensive line. You don't, in the past, you needed Quinnen Williams to deliver, but if he didn't, maybe Bryce Huff delivers the sack. Maybe John Franklin Myers delivers the sack. The Jets in years past had a lot of different ways to get to the quarterback pass rush in terms of pass rushers. Jets don't have that anymore. And that's why Quinnen Williams is important. And I think the same could be said at the corner position with Sauce Gardner. Now, we know the Jets are excited about Brandon Stephens. That is a signing where I think this coaching staff and front office went out on a limb. I think they like Stephens' physical attributes. I think that they believe they can get more out of him than Baltimore did. Now, I do think that betting that you can get more out of a player than the Baltimore Ravens did is a very, very risky bet. But I think best case scenario, Brandon Stephens looks like a quality number 2 corner. He's probably not going to give you what DJ Reed did a year ago. DJ Reed, I think, during his 3 Jet seasons, played at the level of a number 1 corner. I think probably about half the teams in the league would have had DJ Reed be their number 1 corner over the last couple of years. And when you have a legitimate number 1 corner as your number 2 corner, you're in great shape, because just number 1 corner was a guy who was a first-team All-Pro 2 of the last 3 years in Sauce Gardner. I think there's more on Sauce's plate this year, because last year it didn't matter. Sauce could go left, DJ could go right. They just pick up whichever receiver came their way. If the number 1 receiver went with DJ, that was fine. If he went with Sauce, you were happy with it. Now you want Sauce to be able to take the other team's number 1 receiver. Because I don't think the Jets want to get into matchups where the other team's number 1 guy is going up against Brandon Stephens. That's not something you should feel comfortable with, the way you may have felt comfortable about the other team's number 1 guy going up against DJ Reed. And there's another factor here, is that the Jets have changed their defensive style. The Jets are going to be much blitz heavier this year. We know that Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, while they would blitz, particularly on key downs, and while there were games, whether it was the matchup, whether they had some injuries up front, there were games where the Jets would go rather blitz heavy. If it was up to Saleh and Ulbrich, if all things were equal, they'd play 4 and drop 7 guys into coverage. And that put less stress on your defensive backfield. Compare that with what Aaron Glenn's going to do. I think that we know Aaron Glenn is going to send the house frequently, particularly on the key downs. Now, the Jets are probably going to be maybe one of the heaviest man-to-man teams in the league. Now, even the heaviest man-to-man teams in the league usually only play man 50% of the time. So it tends to be more of a 50-50 split, opposed with zone-heavier teams where maybe you're playing zone 70% of the time. But on the key downs, on the 3rd and longs, you can bet the Jets are going to send the house. And that's going to leave Sauce one-on-one with the other team's best receiver. So there's going to be more on Sauce's plate. I think Sauce is going to be left on an island more frequently. He's going to face tougher assignments more frequently, because I think the Jets are going to have Sauce shadow the other team's best receiver. I think whether the number 1 receiver on the other team goes left or right, I think Sauce is going to have to follow him. If Sauce doesn't do that, I don't know why you'd pay him $30 million a year, because you're not really maximizing his ability that way. And you're putting yourself in some bad matchups, because while I think everybody's hoping Brandon Stephens is going to pan out, you did not pay Brandon Stephens to be a number 1 corner. You did not pay Brandon Stephens to get those matchups. Brandon Stephens got a healthy contract, don't get me wrong, but he did not get the kind of money Sauce Gardner got. There's a reason you're paying Sauce Gardner more than Brandon Stephens. So Sauce is critical, Quinnen's critical. And I think any path to a successful season, and this is a Jets team that is kind of being slept on right now. I think if we're being honest, people aren't expecting big things from this Jets team. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I mean, how many times have the Jets had some flashy offseason over the last decade? They brought in a ton of big free agents, made a ton of flashy trades. All the media is all buzzing, NFL.com, ESPN, WFAN, everybody's going crazy about how improved the Jets are, and they come out and disappoint everybody. I don't think it's the end of the world that, maybe the Jets are entering the season with low expectations. Maybe the Jets have finally set themselves up to kind of sneak up on people. Maybe the Jets have set themselves up to have a surprisingly good season for once. Would that not be a treat? But if that's going to happen, I think when a team lacks depth, you are always going to depend on your top players to deliver huge seasons. I think this is the type of year where if the Jets surprise people, the Jets go on a run and shock everybody, it's going to be the type of year where Quinnen Williams reverts to his 2022 form, first team All-Pro. It's going to be a year where Sauce Gardner reverts to his 2022-2023 form, first team All-Pro. And both of those guys have even bigger seasons because they don't have the help around them that they've had in years past. This is the thing about the Jets right now, is that there is a path to a good season. It's kind of a narrow path, but it exists. I don't think that there was a narrow path in a lot of the past 14 years for the Jets. I think a lot of those seasons, the Jets did not have top-end talent. The Jets lacked depth, but they also lacked top-end talent. When you have top-end talent, you have a shot in this league. It requires them to play at a really high level. It requires you to have a bit of luck. These guys can't get hurt. A Quinnen Williams injury is going to hurt the Jets more than it would have 2 years ago. A Sauce Gardner injury is going to hurt the Jets more than it would have 3 years ago. Jets have got to have luck, but they also need their top players to come out and perform this year. If they do, who knows? Maybe this could be the year where we finally look back on a positive Jets season. Wouldn't that be something? Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.